This park behind me, which is Westin Square. It's the second of the parks we have been cooperating with the City of Dallas to construct. There's a total of 4. We call them the priority parks. And our role at Parks for Downtown Dallas is to make sure that the planning, design, construction, and I'll say the stewardship of these parks is properly approached. We work in partnership with the City of Dallas under a development agreement. These are not our parks. These are your parks. These are parks that will be owned by the City of Dallas Park and Recreation Department when they're done. We deed them over, and they are truly public parks. What we discovered, though, over the last 20 years is that by working in concert with the Park Department in a true public-private partnership, we can do these parks in a more expert way, faster, and with great outcomes. So today, that's what I want to spend a few minutes telling you about. First of all, the long history of downtown Dallas goes back to the last century when the Kessler Plan was first created, and it had a lot to do with how Dallas was laid out, how it was constructed in the 20th century. But the most important point relative to the projects we've undertaken is that downtown was a commercial district from the very beginning. So when downtown Dallas started to emerge in the late 19th century, there were buildings one next to the other. There were rail lines going through downtown Dallas. Ultimately, there were trolley lines. But there were no parks and open space because in a commercial district, that wasn't contemplated. What Kessler saw was the need to expand outside that commercial district and begin to plan for parks and beautiful green corridors. The one most notable, of course, is the Turtle Creek corridor, which runs from Highland Park all the way to downtown. But Kessler Park, for example, the great parks in Oak Cliff, other parks in other parts of the city, all had to do with the idea that we had to get past and beyond this commercial district. Now, fast forward to the turn of the 21st century, we still did not have a plan for parks in downtown. And through an initiative that Mayor Laura Miller undertook, there was a planning effort called the Inside the Loop Committee, which determined, among other things, that for us to make the most of downtown, both as a place to live and work and recreate, but also from a commercial standpoint, we had to have parks. And in an ironic way, the economic troubles of downtown in the 70s, 80s, and 90s enabled us to do that because we could buy the land. The city and we and others could actually acquire the land at an affordable price. So at that point, there was an effort led by the Park Department to create the first ever plan for downtown parks. And out of that plan, which was unanimously adopted by the City Council and the Park Board in 2004, came the idea for the parks we're building today, but also 2 predecessor parks, Main Street Garden and Below Garden, which were completed in the first decade after that plan was finished. There was an update of the plan in 2013. We were involved with that at Parks for Downtown Dallas. And that is when we entered into the development agreement with the City of Dallas. And that agreement calls for us to be their agent, the city's agent, in constructing the 4 priority parks. Those are on the east side of downtown, currently underway, Carpenter Park, which will be the largest park in downtown Dallas at 5.6 acres. Pacific Plaza, which is just across from the Republic Bank complex in One Dallas Center, 3.67 acres. That park is completed, was done in 2019. Great design work, on time, under budget. We're done there. Westin Square, where I'm standing today. This is the smallest of the parks at 3/4 of an acre, but it looks much larger than that because of the setting. This is a low-rise environment in the West End Historic District, and what you see here is sky. So when residents, office workers, entrepreneurs come out, this is a Wi-Fi network we're surrounded by, and the whole design is set up for people to come from these buildings around here, enjoy it, but also work here in outdoor spaces, which is very consistent with the entrepreneurial themes. And then the last park will be Harwood Park. We're in design development of it now. It's basically captured by East Quarter, the Masonic Temple, First Presbyterian Church, and the old Statler Hilton complex on the northwest. That again will be about 3.6 or 7 acres. And it's almost through design development, 100% design development. Now we're going into construction drawings. How are we paying for all of this? Well, in a public-private partnership, there's obviously a combination of funding as well as engagement. Of the parks I've mentioned, the 6 parks I've mentioned, the total investment exceeds $100 million. And almost half of that has come from the private sector. The remainder came from various bond programs and the support of the City Council and the Park Board. So I mentioned those parks. When you add Clyde Warren, and this I think is something we can all be proud of, downtown Dallas in less than 20 years will have gone from virtually no parks to 23 acres of new parks in a built environment. And I can assure you that building a park, an open space, any amenity in a built environment is doubly difficult. When you think about the Arts District, that was doubly difficult because it was a built environment. And we've done this around downtown now. It's a network of parks, very important to emphasize that. One relates to the other in the master plan. The designs are complementary, but the whole theme is that wherever you go in downtown, you will be able to experience the beauty and uplifting aspect of a park within a 3 to 5 block stretch of walking. That's a pretty remarkable outcome from a commercial district that was so tightly packed. Well, how about the future? We think this is probably the round of parks that we're going to rely on for some period of time. There may be another 1 or 2 along the way. And of course, there are ambitious plans for another deck park over I-30 on the south side of downtown, things that will be very complementary of what we're doing in the core. But how we advocate for these parks, how we continue to support the idea that they're important to everything about living, working, recreating in downtown or in any dense urban environment, these neighborhood urban parks are essential to our well-being. The Parks for Downtown Dallas, in our case, we're going to stick around. We have several $1 million of endowment in place. We're actively raising additional endowment funds. And the idea is we will be totally focused on downtown parks for the long run. We'll be the stewards not only of the financial resources represented by these endowments, but we'll be on the lookout for the quality of maintenance, upkeep, improvements, and ultimately the uses of these wonderful parks. The question is, how has the cultural environment in Dallas changed to wherein people appreciate green space and open space more? When you think about how Dallas has evolved over the last quarter century, it's no different really than many cities between the 2 coasts in the United States. As they become more populated, denser, the appreciation of open space, of trails, of parks that enable you to interact with not only environment, but friends and others. This is how you sew together the fabric of a community. And I think the appreciation for that in Dallas, as in almost every urban area, has heightened tremendously in the last quarter century. We were more suburban oriented at the end of the 20th century. Certainly the younger cohorts were following a more traditional set of priorities as to how they lived, how they played, how their children were educated. This is an entirely different generation, or should I say generations, who appreciate environmental factors and the whole interplay between the humankind and nature. That's a very substantial shift in priority, and there's demand for it. You hear the demand individually. You hear it from groups who advocate for parks and trails and open spaces, and there's a lot of money being invested in it. This is not traditional funding necessarily. These are younger men and women who are either making a sacrifice to support these kind of activities financially, or they've made a lot of money and they want to do something that they know is important and lasting, and so they invest in these kind of initiatives. So the question is, how does Westin Square differ from the other parks downtown? Each one of our parks has its own personality, if you will. They have design intent, and they certainly have utilization intent. So when we think about Westin Square, which, as I noted, is the smallest of the 4 parks we're helping to build, when it opens on March 26th, it will draw the residents who abut on the west side of the park, the office workers, the entrepreneurs in the buildings to my back and to the right, and it'll bring them together in a sense that activates, it's a word used a lot in landscape architecture and parks, but it activates the neighborhood. You'll see people doing any number of things here in the park. You'll see them reading, contemplating, working. As I said, the Wi-Fi network here will be very powerful, so you can basically take a meeting out of an office, come here to the work table, to one of the benches, one of the other seating areas, and a team of 1 or 4 or 15 people can work on a project together. This will also be a place, I think, where kids thrive. And that's been a theme in every one of our parks. There's a place for children in every one of our parks. Some of the investment in it depends on how much residential there is around a given park. And in the case of West End, it'll probably be not as great as some of the other parks, the other 3 we're working on. But the fountain we have here is almost interactive. It's like a splash with misting and different kind of features. And that'll draw the little guys and girls as much as it will the adults. The other 3 parks, each again of its own personality, have features that draw families in, play areas, but each one's different. So when you think again about the network of parks that's being built, if you live next to one of these parks, you're 5 blocks from the next one. And you can then go from that park to another 5 or 6 blocks and experience the different recreation, the different themes. For example, at Harwood Park, we're going to have a very large lawn, great for yoga, different kinds of uses, picnics, whatever. And then through the middle of the park on what is now Wood Street, has been Wood Street, we're going to follow the path of a stream that was there. It's been covered up for decades, but we're going to activate that as, again, something that feels more like a stream with planting, with water features and so forth, and little bridges across it. Again, something that's activating and exciting. And there's going to be a gigantic play area there. I'm going to save the surprise on that. But it will be the destination for kids downtown. Well, from a lot of places, I think. At Harwood, we then go over to Carpenter. As I noted, it's the largest park downtown, almost 5.7 acres. And it's going to have not just a play area, it's going to have a big plaza with a very significant fountain, beautiful planting areas, but also on the north side, we're putting back in place Bob Irwin's sculpture, which has been there really since the park was built in the late 70s. But for the first time in his career, he's reimagined a piece once the site changed. And it will be a destination for art lovers and others. It's probably the second most important piece of public art in the city of Dallas, owned by the city of Dallas. And it will be very prominent in the park. And then lastly, Pacific Plaza, which is completed, has been for 18 months almost. There we have a combination of a play area, big lawn, and a wonderful architectural feature that HKS did in collaboration with SWA. And that has become a destination. You've seen it already on panoramics of national sports events, a lot of photography of fashion and otherwise with that pavilion in place. One of the great features of Pacific Plaza, which is a park designed by Dallas's own Chuck McDaniel, is Aston Grove, which for years was a neglected space. It was originally Aston Park, named in honor of Jim Aston. And the heirs of the Aston family are just thrilled by the way that Chuck has incorporated the park into the larger Pacific Plaza. One of the wonderful aspects of that is we're able to take advantage of very mature trees there, live oaks particularly. They've been beautifully incorporated into the park. which sits behind the Majestic, looking at the old Republic complex. It was a triangular park that was ignored. It was surrounded by streets. And now it's part of a beautiful public space and a prominent part of it. So when you come to Pacific Plaza, be sure to go to, I'll call it Chuck McDaniel's Grove, Aston Grove, and take it in. It's really beautifully designed. When you ask, well, what about this investment? $100-something million is a lot of money to invest in parks in downtown Dallas. And if you add Clyde Warren in, the number is over $200 million. About half of that has come from the private sector, and there's more investment to come. Well, the reason you do it is the economic impact. By building these parks, every piece of property adjacent to them, every piece of property within 4 to 6 blocks of these parks increases in property value. And so as the tax rolls increase as a result of the quality of these parks and more capital is invested in downtown Dallas, tax revenues to the city of Dallas go up substantially. And I'm talking about an order of magnitude of tens of millions of dollars a year. What's great about that is those tax revenues are available to future city councils to spend wherever they think the need is greatest, anywhere in the city of Dallas. This isn't a roundhouse where we build parks downtown and those revenues come to downtown. It's for neighborhoods, it's for streets, it's for other parks, it's for trails. So when you look at the realistic expectation that property values as a result of these parks will increase by more than $1 billion, and those are permanent tax revenue streams, there is more than adequate economic rationale for the investment. And that's been very clear to city councils and park boards as we've talked them through this over the last 18 years. Now we're realizing the benefit of that, more to come.